Control over water is at the heart of our next story as well. Tomorrow night, Auburn's City Council will take up a proposal to rezone parts of the watershed around Lake Auburn and require more stringent designs for septic systems within that watershed. The city's planning board approved the changes, and Auburn's Mayor Jason Levesque says Lewiston's water department did too. Everything seemed to be on track until Levesque started receiving letters from Lewiston's mayor and city administrator, who both say Lewiston, which also gets its drinking water from Lake Auburn, needs more of a say in this. While Lake Auburn sits within the city limits of Auburn, it's the source of drinking water for both its residents and those in neighboring city Lewiston, which is why the two water districts have worked together for years to keep it clean.
The watershed, though, is Auburn, Turner, Buckfield, Heber, and Minot.
Auburn Mayor Jason Levesque says all of those stakeholders were made aware of a report done by FB Environmental Associates, Horsley Witten Group, and the University of Maine. The report, commissioned by Auburn, shows the water quality reached a tipping point during the past decade when the amount of phosphorus increased, likely due to a dip in forested land. Auburn has proposed rezoning the watershed, removing nearly 150 acres the report showed were not draining into the lake, but the Androscoggin River. That includes a gravel pit and the city landfill.
So by rezoning this into commercial out of the watershed zone, we can now actually have good development, residential, light commercial, retail. We can have appropriate retention ponds, grass, trees, buffers.
But that's what has the city of Lewiston on edge, the idea of development that could drain into the lake.
This is the water that our kids drink, and I'm concerned that if water quality decreases, there'll be no turning back, and we'll have to build an expensive filtration plant.
Lewiston Mayor Carl Shaleen helped pen an open letter to residents shared on the city's Facebook page saying that Auburn's zoning changes could change the water quality so drastically that they would need to build a $40 to $60 million water filtration plant. Susan Bro is a hydrologist with the Maine CDC drinking water program. She can only speak on the water quality coming from the taps, which Bro says is so clean that Lake Auburn's watershed holds one of only 8 waivers in the entire state, meaning Lewiston and Auburn do not need a filtration plant right now.
Development, bacteria, things like that, turbidity. Those are the kind of parameters that need to be met in order to maintain the waiver.
We've seen wind and large storms come in and the turbidity's kicked up. It does go over 1. We typically will shut down around 3.
Kevin Gagney is the deputy director of Lewiston's Water and Sewer Department. He says a level 5 is when Lake Auburn would lose its filtration waiver. Gagney and Lewiston's city administrator Heather Hunter say they'd like to see a more comprehensive study done on what development around Lake Auburn could do to change its quality.
Do you feel like you haven't had enough of a voice in this conversation?
We haven't had any voice.
Auburn Mayor Levesque says Lewiston is resorting to scare tactics and that city leaders from all towns in the watershed have been included in the process. In fact, he shared with us a memo from Gagney to Lake Auburn watershed protection commissioners in which Gagney said staff did not oppose Auburn's proposed zoning changes as of September 2021. The city of Lewiston signed off on this? They approved of the...
Correct, they did. And not only did they approve of the latest recommendations, they're on record going back to the 1990s, talking about how Auburn needed to do more in order to protect the lake.
But Gagney says his concern grew from being excluded from development decisions in the acreage that's been rezoned out of the watershed.
If that's all fields back there and passive recreational paths, that's fine, but there's certain industrial or commercial establishments, if they have storage tanks or chemicals or anything like that, that could cross that watershed boundary that seems so sensitive, that's a concern for us. And I think we need to be at the table to approve the plan.
It's disingenuous to assume that Lewiston is the only city with kids that drink the water. We all have kids that drink the water, and businesses and people on a fixed income. That's why we're taking the proactive development steps to protect the watershed for the next 100 years or 200 years. If you do nothing, we will lose the filtration waiver.
You can learn more about Auburn's proposed changes on our website or at the Auburn City Council meeting tomorrow night. It begins at 5:30 and is open to the public.